Hello friends, welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Emily and this is where I love to talk all about cozy, wholesome books that I love to read. So Happy New Year! It is now 2025. This video is going to be my December reading wrap-up, but it's going to be a little bit different than my previous reading wrap-ups have been because I realized that in December I think I read 2 books that were not a Betty Neels book because we were just very busy, and so just with all the holidays and everything, and I just did not have the brain space to really dive into any other books, so I just read a lot more Betty Neels books. So I thought what I would do is I very quickly, briefly here at the beginning of this video, I would talk about the 2 books that I read that were not Betty Neels books, and then I would go through and talk about the few Betty Neels books that have been really highlights, like my favorite ones that I would like to eventually own as physical copies. This was a video that I was kind of thinking about making already, and then I had 1 or 2 different people that left some comments on my video saying that they would love to hear a list of my favorite Betty Neels books. So I thought that's what we would do. I can hear my baby making noise, so I'm gonna text my husband real quick and ask him to grab him. He's rescued the baby. So yes, I'm going to talk about the first couple of books that I read that were not Betty Neels books, and then we're going to talk about like probably my top favorite Betty Neels, because what I did as I was keeping track of the Betty Neels books that I have read is I would put like a little heart emoji next to the ones that I really liked. But at this point, I have calculated up how many books I read in 2024, so I'm working on my 2024 reading wrap-up video, but that one's taking a little bit more prep work, and so we're just filming this one first. But I do know that I read 60 Betty Neels books last year, and so I don't for 100% remember all of the plot lines for all of them, so I will have a full list in the description box down below of my favorite ones that I noted were my favorite ones, and then I'm going to talk about probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5, however many I can remember the plot for, Betty Neels books in this video, and then we'll wrap it up there. So, the 2 books that I read in December that were not Betty Neels books were, I read The Autumn Bride by Gracie, and I read Yuletide Bride by Kasey Stockton. So The Autumn Bride by Gracie was the one that I read first. And it's the first in a series of books, and it's about, it's mainly about, there's 2 sisters, and then through circumstances they sort of adopt as their sisters 2 other young ladies. And this one's about, what was her name? Abigail. I couldn't remember if it was Amelia or not. It was Abigail. She is working as a governess, and then she finds out that somehow or the other her younger sister Jane? I don't know, I can't remember her sister's name. I think it was Jane, but I could be wrong. She finds out that her younger sister somehow has been kidnapped and is stuck in a brothel, and so she goes to rescue her sister from the brothel, and while she's there, I think she sort of adopts, it's the maid that works there named Daisy, and then there's another girl that is in the brothel, and her name started with a D, and it's kind of a weird one. Or a different one, not necessarily weird, but like a fancy or foo-foo-y name. I can't remember, like Damaris or something, maybe that's what it was. I don't remember. Anyway, so they all pool their resources and whatnot together, and they decide to live together, and they're like, we're going to be sisters now. And then they obviously have no sort of real serious income, so they're very poor, and so one night Abigail decides to go across, there's this big like mansion house, and there's an open window, and she's like, okay, I'm gonna climb over the rooftop and I'm gonna go in the window and I'm gonna find something to steal, because her sister's sick, and so she's just like, we've got to have money to pay for the doctor, like, ugh. And so she goes and climbs in the window, and lo and behold, Lady Beatrice? Yes, Beatrice is in this room, and she has basically been she's being abused by her servants. Like, she's being very neglected. She's sick. She's in bed. She's can't take care of herself. Like, it's a really heartbreaking situation. She's just stuck in this bed. She can't do anything for herself, and the servants have just they're basically stealing all her money and whatnot. And so then Abby comes in and she's just like, oh my goodness. So she gives her like a drink of water and stuff. And then she leaves and she can't help continuing to think about Lady Beatrice. And so she comes back another night and she brings some soup and stuff. And circumstances happen, but basically she and her sisters and actual sister, they to some degree adopt Lady Beatrice, and Lady Beatrice kind of adopts them, and they pretend to be nieces of Lady Beatrice. And Abigail's told Lady Beatrice like everything about their life, you know, that her sister was stuck in a brothel and like everything. And she's just like, are you sure that you actually want us to come and be your nieces? And she's just like, yes, I want you to come and live with me. And so they do. But then before long, her very attractive and handsome sailor nephew shows back up, and he's at first is very much just like, who are these women? Why are they taking advantage of my aunt? Like all this stuff. All that to say, like, it's one of those very typical, like, Regency romances or whatever. I enjoyed it. It was pretty good. I had very high hopes for it. It was fun to read it. Like, it was a different story in, like, the beginning aspect, and this was what intrigued me, because I think I just randomly found this as, like, a suggested book on Libby or something. And it was the fact that she finds this abandoned older lady, and I was just like, oh, that sounds so sweet. Like, they have to go and take care of her and all that. It was good until, like, the end. The end just ruined it for me, and I was so annoyed and so upset. So if you don't want to hear the spoilers, I'll put it on the screen where I'm done talking about spoilers. But basically, the thing that really frustrated me was that it was at the very end when, through all these circumstances, like, Abigail has, like, left, and she's, because, I think it's Max? Yes, Max. He kind of, like, doubts her, and then he acts like he doesn't like her, and that they need to, like, leave, and all this stuff. And so she and her sisters all leave. They're just like, we're not gonna stick around when he's, like, being grumpy and mean and all this stuff. And so they leave and go to Bath, and then he's like, oh no, and he realizes that he's in love with her, and so he goes to go and find her. And so then what they end up doing is, like, he takes her back to his hotel room, and even though he's just like, oh, it could ruin her reputation, like, who cares, sort of a thing. And I was just like, say what? And then it's like he proposes, and then it's like all this thing, and then they're like kissing and stuff, and then I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something along the lines of, like, they start heading for the bedroom, and he's just like, no, I can wait until we're married, like, this is fine, we can wait until we're married, and it'll be appropriate, and all that. And then she's just like, but I can't. And so then they, like, go and, like, do the do. It just infuriated me. I was just like, this is the worst possible ending. Instead of keeping this, like, in the same tone of, like, classy, nice, like, wholesome Regency romance, you just had to do that. Like, hi friends, Editing Emily here. I'm just going through and trying to edit this book video, and I was talking about The Autumn Bride by Gracie, and I forgot, as I was editing it just reminded me, because I was ranting about the ending of the book. Still angry about it. But it reminded me that it was not quite the classy, wholesome Regency romance that I was remembering it being, because there are multiple times throughout the book where he is just, the main character Max, the main guy character, is very much like objectifying Abigail, and just, he's like lusting over her so much. And I remembered that really irritated me, because I talked to my husband about it. I was just like, it's just disturbing. It was like he couldn't, like, not look at her without giving us this inner monologue of, like, how attractive, and I'm not going to go into it, but how attractive and hot she was and all this stuff. So that was the other reason I didn't like this book, which I completely forgot about until I was editing. But anyway, back to the regular video. So that really soured it for me, and basically eliminated any desire for me to finish reading the series. So, I may come back to it at some point, because I like the idea of it, because basically I think there's 4 books, one for each of the 4 girls. And it sounds like it could be fun, but I was just so disappointed. Oh, and this is the other thing too, is I feel like I had 2 or 3 books that I was reading, and they just were not, they were really annoying me, and so that's why I just kept coming back to Betty Neels. done talking about that book, so if you skipped over the spoilers, we're good to go. But yeah, I would probably only give it like 2, maybe 3 stars, because the ending really annoyed me. But I don't typically do star ratings, but if you're just curious. The other book that I read that was not a Betty Neels book was called Yuletide Bride by Kasey Stockton, and I believe I talked about Kasey Stockton earlier in the year. I read 1 or 2 of her books. It was like Suitably Engaged or something, and I really enjoyed it. It had some really good writing. It was a really lovely story. So I saw that this book was available on Kindle Unlimited, and I was like, okay, I'm looking for some like Christmassy stories, like, let's give it a try. It was pretty good. It's about a vicar's daughter, which I don't know what it is, but I've kind of really enjoyed the stories that are about like the small English village vicar's daughters. There's been a few of those with Betty Neels, and I'm always really happy when I'm like, oh, she's the vicar's daughter. They live in the vicarage. I don't know. Anyway, Mercy is the vicar's daughter, and she's older. She's like 27 or something. And all of her younger sisters are either married or engaged, and so she's kind of like this old maid thing. Well, then randomly one day, Colin, he is like the manor lord, like, you know, he's of the village. He's the squire. Like, he has the big house and everything. But it's a crumbling estate. I think his dad basically put them super into debt and then died, like you do. And, so he's left with no money. Well, then his very wealthy aunt has made this condition through her will, and this is all within like the first chapter or 2. The condition in her will, that if he is not married or if he gets married by the end of like 12th night to somebody that he loves, then he can have this whole fortune from her will. And so he's just like, oh no, like, how am I going to find the woman that will marry me with this crumbling estate? I have nothing really to sell myself with, to some degree. I have no, like, huge benefits to marrying me and whatnot. Well, then he's, like, driving home, and then they meet up with Mercy, and he looks at Mercy, and technically they've kind of grown up together their whole lives in the same village. And so he sees her, and he's just like, why not ask her? So they have a whole marriage of convenience thing, and it was a very sweet, pretty wholesome romance. I actually quite enjoyed it. There was nothing huge to write home about. It was kind of generic, if you will, Regency Christmas romance, but it was wholesome, it was sweet, it was nice, there were some cute moments. I liked it. So if you are looking for something like that, there's nothing major, nothing big about it. Pretty simple, normal, wholesome romance. Give it a shot. I do very much like Kasey Stockton's writing, and I am looking at, I want to finish reading her. There's another series of books that I read the first one earlier this year, and I want to read the other 2 or 3 that are in that series. So I'll get to those at some point. Those are the 2 books that I read that were not Betty Neels books, and then other than that, I read all the Betty Neels books. So in December specifically, there were 2 Betty Neels books that I read that merited the heart. So if I really, really, really liked it, I gave it 2 hearts. And if I really liked it, I gave it 1 heart. So, there were some that I read back in September that got 1 heart, but I don't remember from most of them what the plots were exactly. I looked up the plot for most of them that I had given hearts, but even so, the plot summaries that they give on like Goodreads, which is where I looked, they're not always the most in-depth, so I don't always remember the rest of the story. Because let's be real here, Betty Neels writes, most of her books are more or less the same thing. Which I personally enjoy. I like that. They're very tropey. Like, they have the exact same things that happen in pretty much every single one. I enjoy that. But I looked up The Little Dragon by Betty Neels, and I did remember that one. That one's about a girl, I think somehow or the other, she is in Holland and nursing a patient or something, and then something happens. I think her purse gets stolen, so she's left without any sort of money or her passport or anything else. And while she's been nursing this patient, I think it's a crotchety old lady that's really mean and not very nice and all that stuff. And so she like quits that job, I think, but then she's stuck. She has no money, no passport, anything like that. Well, while she'd been working there, she of course had met the rich Dutch doctor, as they are called, and she doesn't realize that he is rich. Like, she thinks he's a poor Dutch doctor, and he's taking care of his nieces and nephews. And so then when they happen to bump into each other after she has lost her purse, because they're kind of friends at this point. And so then he's of course like, well, you can come and work for me and take care of my kids, and not his kids, take care of his nieces and nephews. And there's this whole thing. It is very cute, very charming, very lovely. I liked it because it was a little bit different, because for most of the book, he's not supposed to be rich. Like, you find out later he is rich. Like, that is every single one of the heroes in every single one of the Betty Neels books that I have read so far. And like I said, I've read more than 60 at this point. They're all rich, so you know he's gonna end up being rich. But she made some comment like the first or second time they met where she was just like, I never want to marry a rich man, sort of a thing. So he kind of, I didn't love this part, but he kind of like tells her that he never specifically tells her that he's not rich, but he has this whole like plot to make her think that he's not rich. And I didn't really understand that, and so at some point he like marries her for a marriage of convenience thing, and then finally eventually she finds out that he's rich. And I was a little confused as to why he needed to have this whole plot instead of just... Anyway, I marked it with a heart. I really enjoyed it. The little green dragon. And then there's Emma's wedding, and A Ring in a Teacup, and there's Polly. I don't remember specifically for a lot of those what the thing was. Let me see if I can find, because I pulled up a bunch of them on Goodreads. Where was that one? A Happy Meeting. Oh, this one I really liked because it's called A Happy Meeting, and it's where he meets her on the side of the road, and she has like sprained her ankle, and she's trying to rescue this dog. And so then he's like, oh, okay, like I'll help you, because obviously he's a rich doctor. And so he's helping her back to the house, but then she's got like the evil stepmother thing going on, and so her stepmother is not treating her very nicely. And so of course at some point they have to he has to rescue her to some degree, and I can't remember if he immediately offers the marriage of convenience or if he like gets her a job and then does the marriage of convenience. But that one was really cute. I like the trope of he has to rescue her, you know, the whole like Cinderella thing. I like that. And then let me see here. Cassandra by Chance was one of my favorite ones so far. I loved it. It was Cassandra is coming to watch her niece and nephew on this like little Scottish island, I'm pretty sure. And while they're there, there's this guy, this kind of a hermit. He's hiding away from everybody. He lives in this house up on the hill, and so of course they meet him by chance, and then it turns out he's the rich Dutch doctor, and he's got something that happened with his eyes, and so he's like really grouchy and angry because he thinks he's gonna go blind. And so then she actually has to like help take care of him and keep him from getting stuck in the doldrums. And I just liked it that it was the aspect where it was like he needed help from her to some degree, and that was different than a lot of the Betty Neels that I've read so far. And it was just really sweet, and I really enjoyed it. Then Britannia All at Sea was another one that I really liked, but I can't remember exactly what the plot line was, and the plot is not very helpful on but I remember it was like a lot different. I'm just like looking at some of the reviews trying to see if I can figure out. I don't remember exactly, but I remember that I really, really liked that one. And then the last two that I'm quickly going to talk about were two that I read in December, so I remember them a lot better. Carolyns Waterloo might be my favorite one so far. I loved it. If you haven't read it yet and you want to, I'm very much going to tell a spoiler. So again, I'll put it on the screen where you can skip to so you don't have to hear the spoiler. But I loved it. It was such a good one, such a sweet one. So nice. So, spoilers incoming, basically. It's another marriage of convenience one, and she comes to live with him at his house, and he's kind of this grouchy guy, and he wants to like sit in his study and read his books and do his own thing. And so she falls in love with him, and then she's trying to like woo him throughout the whole thing, and like she learns how to ride to surprise him so they can go for riding in the morning. And it's like through this whole thing, and of course there's the other girl that shows up that Caroline thinks that he's in love with, and that they need to end their marriage so that he can go and be happy with somebody else, like all the typical Betty Neels tropes. And then at the end, it was really, really sweet, because then she starts realizing that, hey, maybe he actually is in love with me, but he doesn't want to admit it. So what she does is she basically writes a letter saying, I can see that you want to be with this other girl, like, I'm gonna leave, we can annul our marriage, like, it'll be all fine. And so then he's just like super upset, and he's trying to race around and trying to find her everywhere, and he comes home and she's sitting there in the drawing room just waiting for him to show up, and he's just like and so she tells him, she's just like, I knew that if you didn't try to look for me, that this marriage was not going to work. Like, it was not going to work out, because I love you, and if you don't love me, like, we can't do this. And I loved that aspect of it, that it was so different, because it happens a lot in the Betty Neels books where there's some other woman and the guy isn't completely forthcoming to the main girl, and so she thinks that he's in love with the other woman, and so then she leaves. And then he has to come after her and be like, my own dear little love. And swoop her off her feet and kiss her. But I liked this one where she was just like sitting there waiting for him to show back up. Like, I thought that was so cute. And then the last one that we're going to talk about quickly today was Esmeralda. This one was a little bit different, and in that it's the main girl has she had an injury when she was younger. She fell off a pony, and the pony like rolled over her foot when she was like 3, and it like crushed some of the foot bones, and so the surgeons that operated on it were not very good surgeons, and so she has like a weirdly shaped foot, and she limps. And so then the doctor, she's a nurse, she works as a nurse at a hospital, and so then she the rich Dutch doctor shows up, and he's like a foot specialist, and so he comes and he's like, I can fix your foot. And so she agrees to do that, and so they go over to Holland, and she's going to be in the hospital for a couple of months after he has redone her foot, because basically what happened was he had to like re-break her foot to then put it back together correctly. So I really liked it for that aspect, where it was like, it was a little bit different, and yeah, it was a little bit different, and there of course was another guy that she thinks she's in love with, and he really just wants to be with her because she has money. This was one of the ones where it was different because she has like money. She's kind of an heiress, and she has her private income to some degree, and so she wasn't just this poor little waif on the side of the road that needed to be rescued by the rich Dutch doctor. So that part was kind of fun, but yeah. So I will have the full list in the description box down below of all of the ones that I have hearted that I really liked, and that I will probably, especially if I read through the rest of the Betty Neels that I can get my hands on this year, I will probably come back to and reread those. But yeah, I hope that you have enjoyed this little video. It's been a little bit longer than I planned it to be, but that's how it always happens. Stay tuned. Like I said, I'm working on getting my 2024 reading wrap-up book done. I read a lot more than I anticipated. I read more than 200 books. We'll talk about the exact number when I get that video ready, but I've got to figure out how many books I reread, how many books I read per month, like all of those fun different little stats and things. So that is coming, and then I will, in that book, it'll be my reading wrap-up and my 2024 reading favorites, so stay tuned for that. I'm very excited for 2025. I have hopes to do a lot more book videos this year. I right now I have 2 YouTube channels. I have like a knitting mom homemaker lifestyle video channel, and then I have my book channel. And this year I'm thinking I'm going to devote a lot more time and energy to my book channel because it is just bringing me so much joy. And right now, as a mom of 2 little boys, 2 and under, it's just busy and I don't have much time for like knitting and crafting and stuff, and so but I'm always reading, so I always have books that I have read. So I'm hoping to make some more book videos this year, so if that interests you, stay tuned. And thank you again, once again, for all of your lovely comments. I've been reading them and they bring me just so much happiness and joy, and it's just so lovely. I've been saying it in pretty much all of my recent videos. It's really hard for me to find the time to sit down and respond to them, but I do read all of them, and I love hearing back from you, hearing books that you've suggested. It's amazing. So thank you so much for each and every one of you and each and every one of your comments. I hope that you are having a wonderful, cozy start to January and 2025, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye!